will be more, we'll try to do more code writing in the rest of the quizzes. And, but today I just wanted to talk about, nothing really, I don't want to get into arrays today because I know you're going to be, you're probably not going to focus on it because you're going to maybe, you're going to be either just reviewing for the test or I don't know how much you have to review because maybe you're really caught up with everything. So that would be great if you were. Um, I wanted to talk about a couple of remaining topics on loops that I saw in the book that we should talk about. So one is, and I put up a folder, and I haven't created a module. There's a folder called Lecture 11 Nest. I think it's called Nested or something. But there's also, I'm talking about, oh, my screen is so dirty, but maybe I'll clean it. Now's not a good time to clean my computer screen, is it? Yeah, I've got a few errands to do. Hold on. Okay, okay, normally, regular classroom, I don't think about my computer monitor. Okay, um, but I'm going to talk about break and continue, two statements that we'll never use that, that beginning programmers are discouraged from using, what you should know about. And then I'm going to show you, and then we're going to talk about nested loops, which are really simple. I mean, the idea behind it is simple. Using it may not be simple, but there's not really a lot to talk, to show. But we'll see several examples of nested loops. And then when we start talking about arrays, that's when nested loops really become important because we're going to be talking. An array is like an array is like there's what's called a one-dimensional array, and that's just like a single row of an Excel spreadsheet. And then we're going to talk about two-dimensional arrays, which is like an entire Excel spreadsheet. And so that's when the nested loops will be like it's a loop inside of a loop. That's when the nested loops will come really important. But we'll see some simple examples today, more fun examples. So I am going to start, I'm just going to open the notes. So yeah, so if you're just joining, there is a file called, yes, you go into the lecture 11 nested loops. There are PowerPoint slides there. And then we'll do the worksheet. And then also I put a Java file up there just to show you, we'll look at kind of like an example of how to use break, or how I see a lot of students using break to avoid using a while loop. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen. So I'm actually going to open the PowerPoint slides up. Okay, so break and continue statement nested. So yeah, so everyone should be seeing something called break and continue statements, nested loops. I don't even put break and continue on a test. It's more like, it's like, don't let this happen to you. Okay, but again, it's okay. So at the end of the lecture, you know how to use break and continues, and right. This would be more like, I should call it for loops instead of while loops. But anyway, this part right here, loops, just loops, because you can use break and continue in either one. But I see break used a lot in a for loop. Okay, so there's a keyword called continue. They're both duh. I'll have to fix this, won't I? Okay, so the keyword continue forces a loop to skip all or part of an iteration. And they're both keywords. So you can't use them, like you couldn't use continue or break as a variable name, even though they're all alphabetic. And let's see. Okay, so here's just a really simple kind of, not necessarily important use of continue, but I hardly ever see. So I am. Let's see here. So let's see here. Okay, so the word continue forces the loop to skip all part of an iteration. And so let's look what happens here. So what we're going to do is we're going to print out the numbers 1 through 10, except for 5. So we're going to skip over 5. And so someone here, let me see. Does someone not mute? I guess I can mute all. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to just do it myself. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So the word continue forces. Okay. So the continue will just skip over the rest of the iterations. When you get to continue, it means you just go back to the start of the loop. It's like a go-to. If I equals 5, go back to the start of the loop. So you'll skip over the rest of the loop. Okay. So what happens is, so I is 0, well, I is less than 10, so we increase I by 1, right? That's what the I plus plus does, or plus plus I. And then if I is 5, discontinue. So we skip over just skip over the rest of the loop. So we don't actually print it when I is 5. And there's a potential danger in that, but let's see here. So yeah, so this basically says what I just said. Okay, so we're going to display all integers from 1 to 10 except 5. And then, okay, here's the problem with while we're all, especially new programmers are encouraged not to use continue. If we're not careful, you can kind of generate this infinite loop or create an infinite loop. Okay, so let's see here. So uh, thought I changed some of this. Okay, I thought I changed just some of the wording this morning, but okay, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so I is 5, I is less than 10. Okay, so if I is 5, we continue. So what happens is this is all unreachable code. This is just unreachable code. So when I is 5, we continue. And you know what? I never changes. So once I is 5, it's always 5 in this particular example. Okay, so this is unreachable. This is what I'm saying. This is, yeah, unreachable code. Everything below here is unreachable. Okay, so once I is 5, I is always 5. And then so 5 less than or equal to 10 is always true, and you get an infinite loop. So that's why we're encouraged not to use continue. And I rarely see students use continue. It's the break that I see a lot. I get to Math 140 and the students like to use break a lot. I think as a way of getting out of using a while loop. So any questions on this? See, now it's super quiet. There's okay, because now everyone's muted. Okay, so and the thing is, it's always possible to write a loop without continue or without break. You just rewrite the code. Okay, so here's this, you just use a little creativity. Here we're saying if I is 5, continue, right? Because we're trying to print the numbers. Originally, what we're trying to do, this is the code that actually works. And so we're printing all the numbers 1 through 10 except for 5. So here, let's look at that same code without continue. Start I out at 0. If I is less than or equal to 10, we continue. Now the if statement is on the we go if I is not equal to 5, we print. Right. So if I is not equal to 5, then we print. Okay. So whereas the previous example is if I is 5, we continue. See, there's no continue statement here. And the other reason I like this is that you're going through the whole, you're going through the entire loop, that the loop actually ends at the last state, or an iteration, not the loop, an iteration ends at the last statement. I just think it makes it easier to debug. So any questions on the continue? It's probably the only time you'll ever see continue in this course. You might see it in, I can't tell you don't see it in the Xi book. I know they do have a section on it. Okay, so here's okay, so here, yeah, I definitely am not looking at the same thing. You're probably looking at something different than me, am I right? I'm sure I changed this. So what did I do, student? Here, hold on, students. Let me see something here. I think I changed the notes and, okay, no. Okay, so yeah, so I guess I have 2 versions of my notes, so that's not really good, is it? Okay, so apologize about this. I'm just taking a short. Yeah, I think I do. Oh, shoot. So, sorry, yes, this is, so this was not really, yeah. Yeah, so since I'm gonna just stop sharing here for a second. And I'm going to bring up this second, and I'll repost this. It's just the only thing that's changed, my examples are just changed a little bit. So I actually changed my example. I apologize. I didn't quite realize I had 2 versions of this. And now which is the one, let's see here. Yeah, so this is, yeah, I changed this, so here.
Professor?
Yeah?
Is the exam going to be due at the end of the day, or is it a couple of days?
No, it'll be due on the weekend.
Okay, for sure. Thank you.
Okay, so no, that would be, if the exam was going to be due today, I wouldn't even be lecturing right now. I'd just say take the whole day to work on it, and I wouldn't be lecturing. It's kind of like what I would do in a regular classroom, right? Just you walk in, here's the test, I just watch you. Okay, so I have managed to confuse myself. Okay, so by having two versions of the same file. But you know what, students, I'll just go back to that one I was using before. So whatever it was, it's not that big a deal. Okay, so I can even, yes, this is what I had before. Sorry, students. I changed the wording this morning. This is what I actually changed this morning. And I didn't realize I had two versions of this file, which I've done before. Yeah, so basically I just made the example a little bit simpler. Okay, so this is what I wanted you to see. Okay, so while true, so what we're going to do, students, is we're just going to add up numbers. And so yeah, sorry for that confusion, because we finished the continue, and now that I got us confused, I going to the break. Okay, so break is also something we want to avoid. And so what we're doing here is we have this while loop, and we're adding a number, we're asking the user to enter numbers, and so we initialize I to 0, and when the user enters a negative number, we stop. And we've seen an example like that before. And okay, so and basically this, I kind of like the while true, right? True is a key word. And so the Boolean expression is always true. So there's only one way to get out. You have to break to get out of this loop. That's the only way to get out of this loop, is to break, because true, the Boolean condition is always true, right? While true, can't change that. It's fixed. Okay, so what happens when the user, initially I is 0, so the first time we check that Boolean expression, if I less than 0 will be false. We add 0 to sum, and then we ask the user to enter an integer, and then the user enters a value. And if they enter a negative value, we come back a while true, and then we check, oh, is their number negative? And then we break. Break actually just exits. It exits from the loop totally, and it goes to the very first statement after the while loop, or it could be in a for loop. That's where I see break used a lot, in a for loop. And I have a really great example here, okay, of using break in a for loop. Okay, so and again, we're discouraged from using break, especially at the beginning. So I'll actually put that in when we start doing more loops in the programs. I'll actually even make that one of the. I'll explicitly say don't use break. And I'd say most introductory programming courses don't. You're not supposed to use break. Your teachers don't like it. It can be hard to debug. It can make, like here, this is so tiny. I mean, it's not, this isn't big a deal. But I do think both break and continue make the debugging process possibly more difficult, in that the loop can exit in more than one place. Right? So typically I think of a loop ending, what makes a loop end is the Boolean expression. And here, what makes the loop end is this break. So, you know, okay, so basically this kind of explains what I just said. Okay, so I'm going to change, yeah, so I'm going to change, I apologize, since I'm going to repost that note. I'm not sure which, I have I thought you were seeing this version. Okay, so remember, so I changed the example this morning. So while true, okay, so how could we write this without a break statement? So we'll just say, well, while I is greater or equal to 0, we increase sum by I, we enter an integer, and if the user enters a negative value, then we exit. So there's really no need, there's never really a need that you actually have to use break. Okay, so with a lot of if statements, you can always get rid of that. Now, I'll just say before we do nested loops, I just want to show you one example that I had, and I put this Java file online. All rules are meant to be broken. So when I say don't ever use break or don't ever use continue, experienced programmers do use break. And they unit test their code a lot. So if you actually look at the when we install the Java development kit, you get all these pre-written classes like there's a file called system.java and string.java. They're in compressed form. We don't really see them. And if you actually open some of these files up, there's break all over the place. I was kind of surprised. I forgot which file it was that I saw the author, the programmer using break. He's kind of a well-known programmer, a very famous person. And he's using break all over the place. And so, but I'm sure it's what's called unit tested. It's very carefully tested so that there's no bugs in it before, because it's not going to look good if the Java people release code that's broken. And break can actually reduce the kind of eliminate some of the logic that you have to do. But again, it's more, I think, for an experienced programmer. So I don't want it. So you might say, well, why do you put break in if you're never supposed to use it? some people, as I say, some people will use it. And sometimes, you have this loop where maybe you want to break, there's so much logic and it's so deep down, if statement inside of this statement, inside of this statement, it might just be easier to use a break. You hear me or anyone say you never do this in programming, basically what they're saying is, for the most of the time, don't do this. It's nothing. I think most rules in programming are meant to be broken. Some are not. Like, you want to put comments in, you want to format, all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of things that there's very few rules in Java programming. Okay, so before we continue here, I want to show you this example where I see students using break when they want to use a while loop. So I'm going to stop sharing. And so I want to share the screen again. Eclipse. Okay, so, and I wrote this, yeah, and I think I put this up online, this file called find. So Zoom is kind of hiding some of this from me. Okay, so I wrote this class called find alphabetic, and so all it does, so the user is asked to enter a string, and then we're going to just print a message that their input contained an alphabetic character, or it doesn't contain an alphabetic character. So, and see how I have line 22 there, I kind of pushed it down. Okay, so we create the scanner. Line 22, we actually read in a string with next line. Next line, remember, the user types in a sequence of characters, and next line reads in the whole string, including the end of line character. And we assign that to input. So here, line 21, I define a Boolean variable called contains alphabetic. And okay, and I'm just going to initialize that to false. So we'll assume the string doesn't have, we'll start by assuming the string doesn't have alphabetic characters. And then if we find one, if we find once we find just one alphabetic character, we will set contains alphabetic to true, and then we'll break out of the loop. Because because all we want to know is, basically, this doesn't exist. Does there exist an alphabetic character? And once we find one, just exit from the loop. Okay, and so that's what we're doing there. So remember that every string has look there on line 22. So every string has this method called length that tells us the number of, we did talk about, that feels like a long time ago, but I know it's only a week or two ago, but we haven't really talked about it a lot. Every string has a method called length that tells us the number of characters in the string. And then it also has that char@at method that gives us an individual character in the string. And the very first character is at position 0. And there's actually this built-in method. I kind of, instead of writing the logic myself, I decided to use this. There's this built-in method called character is letter. And when you put a character in, it tells you is an alphabetic character or not. It returns true or false. Okay, so we put a char value on line 23 into that is letter. And if it's like 9, then we return false. And if it's some kind of, something from the alphabet, we return true. And if that's true, yeah, we just, I changed contains alphabetic to true and then break out of the loop. Because I figure just stop the loop. But let's see if we can also write this with a while loop. Okay, so it's a little bit harder. And so, I asked my Math 140 students not to use, to do what I'm about to do. So here, so let's just run this. And so we'll enter a string, and how about no alphabetic and like 1 and maybe a comma and I don't know, plus. And so we see there's no alphabetic, and this better work. Yeah, it does not contain it. So then I print out the actual string the user entered and does not contain an alphabetic character. Right? Because it looked at first it looked at 7, no, 8, no, and so forth. That's what this loop does. It's parsing that string one by one, right? Because we started I equals 0, and we look at car at 0 and car at 1. Let's just try it one more time. Let's put an alphabetic hello. Okay, so let's say a bunch of numbers. Let's put U in, our favorite alphabetic character. This better come up true. Yeah, contains an alphabetic character. When it gets to the U, it stops. So yeah, it says U is alphabetic. So and I'm not sure what character that was. It was right out there. So when it gets to the U, it says is car. When it got to that U, it says, it got to this. Remember that when we put the U in, when it got to that would be true. And then, hello. And then, yeah, so contains alphabetic would be set to true. And then we break. There's no reason to continue. Once you hit an alphabetic, you just stop. And that's what I asked the Math 140 students to do. There's no need to do unnecessary iterations. We don't want a lot of iterations that aren't required. So this is an exist problem. There's at least one character in this string have this value. So, and I would say if given the opportunity, a lot of my Math 140 students would do this because they're not, because we don't teach it. I think it's in Math 130, we teach lots of for loops and we teach almost no while loops. And so now this is the math, this is what hopefully I can do this. This is what I ask the students to do. There is a way to do this with while loops. So while, so we assume contains alphabetic is false. I realize the logic is harder. And we have to, it's a while loop, so we have to declare, right? That's the great thing about for loops. We declare the counter variable in the for loop. So let's just declare the counter variable outside the for loop. Well, I is 0, and so while I is less than, so it's the same Boolean expression, input dot length, but we have to do one more thing. We're going to stop when contains alphabetic is true. Okay, so we initially assume contains alphabetic is false. So I go not contains. And now we have this, what's called a compound Boolean expression. And so this loop will exit, right? There's two conditions in which this is false. Either I is equal to input.length, right? We've gone to the end of the string, or contains alphabetic has been set to true. And now, I'll cheat a little bit here. Yeah, so if, honestly, so this comment I don't need anymore. Okay, all this. Okay, so yeah, so contains alphabetic is set to true. I'm gonna have to do some, let's get rid of this. So I'm just making a big mess here. Contains alphabetic is true. And then we also have to make sure and increase I. Okay, so if contains alphabetic is set to true, look what happens at the next iteration. Remember what happens is at the end, when you get to the end of this block here, like when you get to line 35, you go back to line 30 and you inspect that Boolean expression. Not true is false. And this is an and condition. They both have to be true. So this loop stops when I is equal to input.length, because the last car is at length minus 1, or when contains alphabetic is true. And we should get the same. I'm just going to erase all this just to move all this up here. Hopefully this works. Let's just put in, let's say 3, 4, 5. Yep, okay, so that worked. And let's put in, so let's put the U, let's put in like T. Let's just follow by a bunch to see how, once you see the very first car, the very first alphabetic character is T, there's no reason to keep on going. hopefully this better come out right. Yeah, contains an alphabetic character. Okay, and yes, we didn't perform any unnecessary iterations. So students, this is basically, yeah, this is kind of like I'm advertising Math 140. This is what I do in Math 140. This is kind of what I do the first couple of weeks. I mean, I don't do this every day. This is one of the things I do in the first couple of weeks. I review, and this is one of the things that we do. Okay, so my point here is that you don't need to use break. So when I see a lot of math, the reason when I go into Math 140, I see a lot of Math 140 students using break in a for loop because they don't know how to write a while loop. They're not comfortable with while loops. And I think it's just because and I'm not blaming them because we just don't do enough of them. We don't do stuff like this. We don't do stuff like what I did right here in line 24. So this is really kind of hard, this compound Boolean expressions I think are kind of hard when we're first starting to learn how to program. But I'll put this file up there. The original file is up there, and then I'll put this up there with the while loop too. And I'll make sure the right PowerPoint. It's just the wording that changed a little bit. It wasn't a big difference in the PowerPoint slides, but so since that's all there is about break and continue. No, you're not going to see this on a test or anything. I just want you to be aware that these words are out there, and also don't be tempted, and that you're not allowed to use them in this course. I won't use these. Okay, go ahead.
So if we want to count the letters, do we declare it and then put the count plus plus after the ifs?
Okay, so you're talking about something a little bit different. So let's say now we actually wanted to count the number of alphabetic characters. Yeah, so what I was doing is just, okay, once we find one, all I care about is okay, that would actually be a different problem. If that would be a little bit of a different problem. All I'm saying is this is like an exist. Does this alphabetic character exist or not? Now, if we actually wanted to count, yes, you would need like a count, like something like count alphabetic. You initialize it to 0, and then you wouldn't have, if you were doing what you were talking about, Richard, you wouldn't have this. You'd actually have to inspect you'd have to actually inspect every character in the loop. And then that's a great use of a for loop.
Okay.
So to answer your question, or?
Yes.
Okay. So any other questions before we get to the really exciting part of today's class? So, okay, so we'll stop sharing here. And I already have 1 or 2 more pages. This is just an introduction to nested loops. Loop inside of a loop, a for loop inside of a for loop. And later on, I actually have an example of a nested while loop. It's a problem I found at UCSD, but I think we can all do it. Stop sharing. Okay, so let's go back to the, okay, so we're done with break, we're done with continue, and who knows, hopefully, okay, let's see here. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so and I already have 2 more slides, and then I have a worksheet, and maybe we can do a couple of the problems, and then and I'll show you where it is in the Zybook too, I think. Okay, so let's use a nested loop to generate the following output. Okay, and you see it's this kind of like triangle, this kind of right triangle. So the first row has 1 star, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. And so next, I actually have the code on the next slide. Okay. And see how so when I say nested loop, what I mean is a for loop inside of a for loop. And so what happens here is, and so maybe I should have added a few more words. Maybe I'll add some slides with some words in this. Now that I'm thinking about this, it might be not so obvious. Okay, so we start the outer loop, and row starts out at 1, right? And the first statement in the outer loop, this is I'm going to just highlight it right here. That's the first statement in the outer loop, is another for loop, right? Row starts out at 1. Okay, we initialize row to 1, and then we check the Boolean expression. Row is less than equal to row is less than equal to 5, and yeah, so row is less equal to 5. So 1 is less equal to 5. So now we go to the first statement in the outer for loop. The first statement in the outer for loop is another for loop. Okay, so now we owe it, so col starts out at 1, and then we check. In this case, this is what's a little bit tricky, is col less than or equal to rho? Rho is currently 1. 1 less than or equal to 1 is true, so we just, we print the star, the asterisk. Okay, so then we increase col by 1, right? 1 is 2, and so now col becomes 2. 2 less than or equal to 1 is false. So we jump out of the inner loop, and now we do a print line. This generates a line break. So notice that this is no line break. So it prints all the stars on the same line. And so we want to, so if you look what we're trying to print here, when we get to the end of the row, we want a line break. Otherwise, all the stars are just going to, am I showing you? Oh, yes, I am showing you. Okay. So, so what's maybe, now I think of what might be a little bit hard here. There's two things going on here. One, we do have a nested loop. And also right here, this Boolean expression in the inner loop depends on the value of rho in the outer loop. But now let's see what happens when rho is 2, right? So we go system.out.println. So then we get to here. So go back to the outer for loop. Go to start. So now we come back up here. We increment rho by 1. And so now rho becomes 2. 2 less than or equal to 5 is true. Okay, now what happens is then you go back and do the first statement in the outer loop, which is this inner loop again. The thing is, we start from the beginning. We start from col equals 1. And then only now rho is equal to 2. Okay, so 1 less equal to 2 is true. We print a star, increase col by 1. 2 less than or equal to 2 is true, so we print another star. And then we increase col by 1, and we get 3. 3 less than or equal to rho, 3 less than or equal to 2 is false. Okay, and the inner loop, we do a print line, go back up here, and then we increment rho by 3. So this is, yeah, so what happened? Okay, so, oh yeah. And so this is how we get this. So this prints when rho is 1. This prints when rho is 2, and so forth. See, if we just take one of these, let's say if I just took this inner loop out. Say we just take this inner, let's say we just had this inner loop right here. Maybe I should have put this first. Maybe I'll change the slides and I'll add this to this. I should have maybe put this before the example here, but let's say you just had this example problem right here. Rho, let's say we just look at this, the inner loop for rho equal 3. So we're looking at the inner loop for rho equal 3. And isn't that what there it might be easier to see. We're going to print three stars with no line break, right? This is what this loop does. Print means no line break. Okay, start col at 1, 1 less equal to 3. So you print the star, and then increase col by 1, right? 2 less equal to 3 is true. Print another star, and then increase col by 1. 3 less equal to 3 is true. Print another star. Increase col by 1, 4 less equal to 3 is false, and then you would do the print line. You go to the next line. So there's just an example of what the inner loop will do. So this is inner loop for col equal to 3. Okay, so I think I'm going to just add that I'll put that before this nested loop, because maybe that'll make it a little bit clearer if you're just reading this on your own. But any questions from anybody on this? I thought we could try. I have a couple of worksheet problems, and then we could try this. And again, when we get to arrays, yeah, we'll do a lot of, there'll definitely be a section on inner loops, nested loops. But any comments or concerns or questions? I know it's kind of, if you're confused, maybe you don't know what kind of question to ask. But let's try another one here, students. And so, and then maybe we'll even try one of the challenge problems in the book. Okay, so I have this worksheet here. If I was smart enough to, let me stop sharing this. Then maybe we'll go and do this in Eclipse. Okay, so there's a bunch of them here. So maybe we'll try, I don't know, number one is basically, it's just like that first one, only we, instead of starting row equal to 1, we start row equal to 5 and we decrement. So how about if we try number 2? Okay, so do you see there's that, it's like a square. It doesn't look like a square, but it's like, it's 5 row, it's 5 by 5. Okay, but along the main diagonal, we're printing A. And and otherwise we're printing B. So you actually need an if statement. So if the row and the column are the same, we print A. Right, you see that? Let's close the door here. Some noise in the background of my house. Okay, so okay, print A. Else if row not equal to col, print B. Okay, and so okay, so let's try this then. Okay, so let's just create another. Oh, I have to give it a name. Okay, let's just call it test. Test. Okay, yeah, so I got it to generate okay, so let's just get rid of this. Okay, so students, remember what we're going to do. We're going to print that square, with A's along it's either, it's A's along the main diagonal, B's otherwise. So, okay, so how about this? So I'll make it simple. I'll just go, okay, so for int I equal, and you can use variables here, make a, so instead of putting a 5 there, I can make like row, I can have number of rows be a variable, but let's just do this. And then row plus plus. So this loop has 5 iterations, and then we have an inner loop.
So we can't see your screen.
Oh, aren't I sharing? Oh, okay. Okay, let me stop sharing and I'll share it again, okay? Thought I shared the Eclipse. Maybe I didn't do that. Okay, thank you for letting me know that. Can you see that now?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I thought, yeah, I probably just close the PowerPoint slides and usually, yeah, I probably just close the PowerPoint slides and open up Eclipse without sharing it. Okay, so, okay, thanks for, thanks for letting me know that. I should pay more attention to what I'm doing. Okay, so students, what we're doing is we're solving this problem, right? We're printing, that square where it's 5 rows and 5 columns, and they're all B's except along the main diagonal where they're A's. So, okay, so what I did here, so I just started a loop, row equal 1, row less equal to 5, row plus plus. We're gonna have 5 rows. What I'm saying, if we want, we could make that 5 a variable, like number of rows, but let's just do this for right now. Now we need the inner loop. So this will generate the number of rows, 5 rows. And now for each row, we have to print out columns. So this inner loop will actually print out the individual columns in a row. So you started at 1. In this case, it's going to be 5. So so the number of, so here, let me do this, col plus plus. Okay, so that example in the PowerPoint slides, the number of columns was equal to the number of columns was equal to the row number. Like the first row had 1 column, the second row had 2 columns, and the third row had 3 columns. Here, every row has 5 columns. Okay, and now we're going to either print out A or B. Okay, so if the row is equal to because if it's on the main diagonal, that's where we print, the main diagonal is when you go from upper left to lower right. So if the row is equal to the column, we print A, right? And it's going to be print, not print line, because we don't want a new line. Or I could either do car or string A. Okay, else. Let's just print B. Let's see what happens if we don't put the print line in. It's going to be, okay. So let's just see what happens. I notice how I don't have the print line. I just have a bunch of prints in here. So this is here. I'll separate this just so we can see. This is the inner loop. Of course, the formatting should tell us where the inner loop ends. So, and sometimes even putting a comment in is kind of nice. And inner, this I think helps, inner loop. Okay. And so notice how I don't have a print line, just all these prints. So it should get, you're gonna get this long line, and we're gonna get this long line. Yeah, so if something bad happens, you're doing it. Let's see what happens here. Should be 25 of these. Oh, no, yeah, long line. For some reason, I think it was gonna go down vertically, no, horizontally, but see, it's not the square, right? Because we don't have the print line. At the end of every row, we need a print line. Okay, so before we start the next row, we need a line break. And just doing an empty print line generates a line break. Okay. So it's really not, I think it's not too bad. You just have, I'll let you do the other two on your own. It's not an, I mean, I would get the exam done first. I'm gonna post another, I'm gonna actually drop one programming assignment so in case something happened to one of your assignments or something you couldn't finish. And the next one is gonna come straight out of the Xi, because actually I'd written one and I looked in the Xi book, the Xi lab, one of the Xi labs is exactly like a lab I was gonna do. So I'll put that up there for you to try. It's actually a pretty, I hate to say easy because none of it is easy, right? But I think it's straightforward. How's that? It's straightforward. But I thought if we could, let's try one of the challenge activities in the Xi book. Let's see if I can do it. I have to tell you, some of you have asked me questions about the challenge activities and they're really picky. And I have to admit, I get kind of challenged by, I think, what's the problem? Sure, it looks right to me. Okay, so any questions on, so this is so again, this is what, okay, so far we've talked about break. I know I get a little kind of unorganized when I speak. We started by talking about break, right? And we started talking about continue, where continue allows us to just skip over the rest of an iteration in a loop, either a for loop or a while loop. And it's, you know, and again, I rarely see students using it, and I discourage new users, new programmers to use it. It can lead to, I think it leads to code that's hard to debug, and also can generate an infinite loop. If we're increasing a counter variable after the continue, yeah, we'll get this infinite loop. And then we talked about break, which I see a lot. You know, it's a way I think of avoiding while loops. Basically it turns a for loop into a while loop. And then again, as you become more experienced, if you do, you know, do a lot of programming as you get, you know, go on, if that's something you choose to do, then I think it's okay to use break. But of course, if a lot of college courses, you're actually discouraged from using break. So don't just remember, you might be, if you're in a course and your teacher should tell you whether or not it's not okay to use break. And if they can't, it's not really fair to take off if you haven't been told not to use it. But I'd say a lot of college courses will discourage use of break. And then we talked about nested loops, which will be really very important when we get to what are called two-dimensional arrays, which is really just like a table. So why don't we? So if there's no questions, why don't we look at one of the Xi book activities? And let's see, did I open up Xibooks? Let me make sure Xibooks is open. I thought of course okay, let me just make sure Zybook is open. And just give me a second here. I should have done this earlier. Okay, so let me go back here. And I'm going to do hello, share the screen. Where is it? Where is it? I just, oh, right here, right here. Okay, so let's look here, and then I want to, what do we want to? Okay, so let's look here. Oh, they have this section. We've done a lot of this already. See how there's stuff here that we actually haven't covered. Can you see the Zybook? I think you can. And then just let me know if you don't see what I'm seeing. I'm seeing like chapter 4 is iBooks. Okay, so then this is what we're talking about right now, nested loops. We did talk about break and continue. We'll talk more about, we talked about a little bit about variable name scope. That's like when you declare a counter variable in a for loop, you can only use in a loop. This enumerations, I'm just surprised they have it. That's kind of an advanced topic. So let's look at nested loops here. This is kind of an introduction to nested loops. And then, and let's see here. So, well, this is kind of a good problem here. So how many, so I'm looking at problem 1 there. Given the following code, how many times would the inner loop body execute? Let's see if I, okay, the inner loop, well, okay, let's see if I make sure I understand the question. Okay, given the, how many times the inner, I guess I think of how many iterations, and so how many, the outer loop, well, row starts out at 0, and then it'll be 1, but it won't execute when row is 2. So the outer loop executes 2 times. And then now the inner loop, I think, will execute, now col starts at 0, and it stops when col is 3. So the outer loop executes when row is 0 or 1. The inner loop executes when col is 0, 1, or 2. And I think they mean in total, not just for one particular. I'm going to guess the answer is 6. I think 2 times 3. The outer loop executes twice. The inner loop will execute 3 times every time the outer loop executes. So let's see if 6 is what they're talking about.
I think it's only asking for the inner loop.
Oh yeah, it's. I have to be honest. I wasn't sure. I mean, when you said you're, oh, yeah, that's why I go. Oh, you know what? I didn't actually prepare this, and now I'm not sure what they're talking. Yeah, I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know whether it was 6 or 3. So, yeah, no, yeah, it's a little bit. Yeah, that wording is a little because you were confused and I was confused too. It's a little ambiguous. Of course, it's not on a test, so it doesn't matter, right? And plus, you can answer, like, let's say we had just put 3. I think 3 would have been a reasonable answer. Oh, no, don't, what I thought I could do, oh, what did I do correct? I thought it allowed me to do it again. Okay, whatever. Maybe it's only when you do it wrong. I think if I open this up again, when you close the Zybook and open it up again, your answer's gone. But yeah, okay, so yeah, I think in these problems, they're talking about the loop the whole loop executing, and how many, I actually, I don't word my problem this way. I usually would word it as how many iterations do we get from this loop? In this case, it's 6 iterations. Or how many lines of output, if there was an output, let's say the inner loop printed some lines of output. I'd say how many lines of output do we see? Yeah, that wording is ambiguous. Okay, but okay, since you're allowed to, okay, so let's see here. What is let's try this. Let's go down. let's not do any more of these were okay. I'll let you try those. Okay, challenge activity. I thought we could try one of these. Okay, so okay, maybe I'm going to regret this. Okay, so this looks vaguely fun. Challenge activity 4.7.1, and so print the numbers 0 through 1. Okay, the username is a variable. Okay, and you're going to indent by the number of spaces. So for each printed line, so the Zybook is getting in my way. Not the Zybook. For each printed line, print the leading spaces, then the number, and then a new line. Okay, so and I think so. So if row is 0, there's no space, and then okay, so then So let's see if I can do this. Okay, so okay, so then okay, so if user num is okay, so it's going to start at 0. So the user, so we start, so if the username is 3, we'd actually do 4 rows. So let's just try this here, and then you can help me if you think I'm doing something really stupid. Okay, so I can talk about myself as being stupid. Okay, I guess I call myself that a lot. Okay, so we're going to start from 0 to user num. All right, so let's see. So we're going to use a for loop. Okay, so 4, and I hope they're not going to complain about how I do my loops. I think they only want the output and not so much. And I know they declared their counter variable. Oh no, they did. See, they have the I and the J. Yeah, see how they have this I and the J right here? So okay, so I is 0. I have to be careful there. And then I think it's I less than or equal to user num. Right? Because if user num is 3, we're going to go from 0 to 3. And I'll do it just like they do it, just so they won't get mad. Okay, so then, okay, this is the hard part. So if I is 0, we print no blank spaces. So the number of blank spaces is equal to the number that we're printing, right? So if we're printing 2, I think it's 2 blank spaces. Okay, so print J, start J is 0. And I think this might be, I think what they want is J less than I. Because if I is 1, then this, so when I is 0, this inner loop will not execute, right? 0 less than or equal to 0 is false. And then, so then we print, and this is where I have to be honest, they get so picky about some of these like spaces, and I might actually end up giving up here. Okay, so we print J number of blank spaces. And then we have to print the user num. No, we have to print I. We have to print, yeah, we print user num. Yeah, we print user num. I think that's right. Print, no, we print I. Print system.out.print I. Okay, we're going to start at 0, right? Luckily, this example is helping me. And then we need the line break. So let's see, what would happen if we just ran it right now? I know it's wrong because there's no line break. So let's see what happens when we, oh, and then we have to do, does it actually have some, oh, these challenge activities, I guess we don't put an input in. So what happens here? End a line. Oh, it doesn't like something I did here. Oh, okay. I did C students. So if I ever tell you I never write a compilers, you know that I don't know it. I'm lying. There, that was my error, student. No, we all make compiler errors. That's the great thing about Eclipse is that I wouldn't have been able to run it. I would have seen that red dot ahead of time. So now let's see that. Yeah, now I think I think the number of, for every closing brace, there's a opening brace, there's a closing brace. And so output is nearly correct, but the white space differs. Expected output, yeah, and it doesn't like my, now let's put the print line in. I have to tell you, because iBook is so picky, I'm not going to guarantee that this is going to work. Maybe, I'm not sure if they want car here, print car. I'm just going to do this, and if this doesn't work, this is all we're going to do. But I think this will at least give you the output. Okay, so let's just look at what we did here. Okay, so there's no, the number of blank spaces printed is equal to I. So when I is 0, there's no blank spaces printed. So that's how I knew to put J starts out at 0. When J is 0, I don't want any blank spaces. So that's why I knew that J is less than I. Okay, and then like when I is 1, we just want 1 blank space. So so that's why I put, yeah, this would work. When I is 1, 0 less than 1 is true. we increment j by 1, then jb would be 1. 1 less than 1 is false. So let's try this now. I have definitely been humbled by Zybooks. You know, see, it still doesn't like me. Your output, wait a minute, what do you mean by it? Huh? Your output, how could this be? Okay, so maybe we'll stop here while I figure this out. Output is, oh, wait a minute. Well, that was my first test. Oh, wait, no, output is nearly correct, but the white space continue. Wait a minute. Print line. So let's see, print. Oh, I put it in the wrong place, students. Print, I put my print line in the, so students, see that if you think that computer programming is easy, it's not. See how I've made several mistakes here? Okay, now, yeah, 5 hours from, okay, students, just one more try. Let's try this. All right, it finally worked. And I will, okay. And so there's one more. Okay, so I think these are kind of fun. Yeah, there's one more. I'll let you do this next one on your own. I haven't assigned. I'll put this in a next Zybook assignment. But this is kind of fun. And since I've done this in class for you, I'll even put this as an attachment so everyone sees it. But yeah, so I've had a couple errors here when I did this. First, I forgot the compiler error. I forgot in line 17 to put the curly brace. And then I put the print line, this print line, line 16, it should have been in the outer for loop. Here, I'll just separate this so we can see how see that. Right, so that, yeah, I put the print line out after the end of the outer for loop instead of in the inner for loop. Of course, then we had to understand the problem too, and just realize the number of blank spaces is equal to I. So that what I think makes this a little tricky is this, you know, what's the Boolean expression for the inner loop? And I think that's what makes all these problems that we've done today a little bit tricky. When we get to the two-dimensional arrays and the nested loops, then it's not quite as tricky. But yeah, this I think might be kind of tricky. This might be the hardest part here. What's the Boolean expression for the inner loop? So students, are there any questions right now? As I said, I'm gonna, when I get off here, I just would like to proofread the test one more time, and then I'll put it up there. Yeah, you can just turn it in the weekend. Some of you I know work during the week, and some of you have time to do it today. But if there, I'll stay here. I'm going to stop sharing right now. And I'm going to stop recording. I should have stopped the recording when I did the Zybook so no one saw me.